So good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Brooke Lovelace. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council. And I am going to be real brief with my remarks today. As you can see, we've got a really packed agenda and a short amount of your time today. But first, I really do want to thank our senators and representatives that are here with us today. We did have approximately 15, I think, that registered, so that's great. We don't have a lot of time allowed to recognize you by name, but we do hope that there will be time after our presentation for comments and remarks by any of our legislators who may want to do so. I do want to thank all of our legislators for their work for the disability community for last year, for reducing the children's mental health waiting list, for stabilizing the mental health and disability service regional systems. The flexibilities that they added to the iAble accounts really made that more appealing for folks, and I hope it have increased people that actually sign up for those accounts. And then also the work to get the DOT to add adult changing stations to new rest areas. As you can imagine, though, there, of course, is still more work to be done, which is really what we're here today about. And we are going to share with you our legislative agenda and share some stories with you today. I'm going to turn it over to Bill, who's our council's public policy manager, and he will start us off with our agenda.
Good morning, everybody. And like Brooke said, we're so glad that you're here. We're so glad you're here to spend some time with us to kind of figure out and learn what's important to Iowans they're living with disabilities. And so we're excited to share and reveal our 22 legislative priorities. The first one is really around workforce. And if you're in Iowa, you've heard that term quite a bit, but we're looking to fully fund healthcare services and community-based supports to address the workforce crisis, both in rural and urban Iowa, in urban areas. The second one is we're really looking to support an inclusive community for all Iowans and making Iowa more inclusive, but also accessible to people living with disabilities. And then finally, we'd like to work with legislators to reduce and eliminate the home and community-based waiting list. And today we have a number of guests with us to kind of highlight their story and share how their story connects to one of our priorities. So again, the first one that we're looking at is to fully fund the healthcare services to address the workforce crisis. We know it's quite a challenge, and probably highlighting that more than anybody is we invited Tucker Cassidy from Waterloo, Iowa to be with us today. And Tucker's a graduate from the University of Iowa, and he has a long history of advocating for people in Iowa. And he was scheduled to be on here today, but he's not on today because of caregiving issues. And so his story really, this is Tucker and his family, but his story was really highlighted to me just recently in an advocacy phone call that we were on together. He came on and his camera wasn't on and he apologized. And he said that his day started out like many days over the last year where he wasn't aware or wasn't sure who would show up to be his caregiver. He had been on numerous phone calls that morning with his agency to provide and kind of understand when he'd received care. And he said that the meeting that we were on was about 2 p.m., but he said they were able to come in and provide the necessary cares. And he was pretty clear what those cares were, some personal cares. In addition to that, going through his stretching routine, but he said it was all abbreviated and it was about less than half of what he needed. At that point, he said the reason he didn't have his camera on was because he had been placed back in bed and he wasn't sure if his evening caregiver would show up. He does have family as a backup in the area, but his story is a little bit more complicated than that, in that at one time he lived in Cedar Rapids and his parents lived in Waterloo. Because he was not able to provide necessary backup for his community-based services, he moved back to Waterloo so that his parents could fill in the gaps. And the workforce shortage is challenged in a lot of areas. One of the things that Tucker pointed out in that phone call that we had was that his parents are filling in. And so these are parents that are working in jobs, they're doing their own life, and they're filling out part of his shifts on a daily basis. In addition to that, the caregiver he had today was a female. And he says, one of the things that he struggles with is there's, in addition to the workforce shortage, there's a significant shortage in male caregivers as well. but he's not able to be here today, and it kind of highlights what our issues are as we talk about that. But I just wanted to kind of share his story. He'd be much better at it, and tell an important part. But I also think that him not being here today is a sign that, you know, every day for him has been a challenge this last year. And you'll see in our highlighted priorities that Brooke attached, he said he's receiving about half of the care that he has usually been scheduled for. And these are necessary cares to keep him mobile and engaged and living in the life that he would like to. So our next priority is that we'd like to support an inclusive community for all Iowans, making Iowa more accessible. And it's my pleasure. I get to introduce one of our council members and someone I've really come to enjoy and really enjoy speaking. So I'll get out of his way pretty quickly here. But Rob Rosenboom, he's an entrepreneur and a motivational speaker, and you'll find that out pretty quick. He's living in Northwest Iowa with his family. But again, I think he's got a story to share.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks everybody for being on this call. Yes, my name's Rob Rosenboom. Live in Northwest Iowa. Actually live in a little community called Sheldon. It's crazy. I do love being an Iowan, but I do think we have some areas of improvement that we can make in the accessibility world. As you can see in that picture, that's my family. I have a beautiful wife, and then I have three great kids. And I love going to their sporting events, whether it's a cross country meet, a volleyball game, or it's going to listen to a band concert, choir concert, whatever it may be that they are in. And when we talk about inclusive in the state of Iowa, one of the biggest challenges that I run into, you can see I have a son there, he's 19, but a lot of times, you know, in high school, he may have been participating, and then once he obviously graduated, he's not always home. So when my wife and I go out or go to a community event or a school event or even a public restaurant, how do you go to the bathroom? That's been our biggest challenge. I get the opportunity to travel a lot. We were just at an event last weekend where I went to a restaurant and we have to shut down the men's room. You either shut it down or you ask the guys in there, hey, you cool? My wife's coming in because I need to go to the bathroom. And so we do that over and over and over again, where we go to an event, we go to a public engagement, and we're like, how are we going to use the bathroom? And to be honest, most of the time, everybody's very understanding. But yeah, you got to have somebody that you meet and say, hey, you mind watching the door for a little bit? And then even when they watch the door, somebody will sometimes get past. And not that it's super awkward, but it's a little awkward when you're in the bathroom going. Or a guy walks in and you're coming out with your wife and he freaks out because he thinks he went in the women's room. But, you know, those are all stories of our life, and the accessibility challenges are out there. And I know the rule of grandfathering in has been out there, but I also would like the conversation to begin. When do we stop using the word grandfather and realize we have a very mobile disability community that wants to be out in the public, that wants to spend their dollars, that wants to go to entertainment events, wants to support their local schools or their kids at their school? And how can we make that more inclusive, whether it's bathrooms or it's public sidewalks or it's doors that you can open when you're in a wheelchair, etc. So that's a little bit about who I am and my story.
Rob, thank you. And Rob definitely highlights the problem. And we just yesterday was speaking at our council. We have a 24-member council, and one of our council members said that she realized after hearing Rob's story, she realized that maybe that's why her husband and his family didn't travel during the summers when they were kids. It's because their mother had a disability, and a lot of that comes around. There's accessibility, but then there's a dignity piece with that, and some of the other things that we've focused on in regards to an inclusive Iowa is around sidewalks or around transportation. But I think that the not having an accessible Iowa or an inclusive Iowa leads to isolation, which sometimes is one of the biggest hurdles for Iowans. So thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
And our final priority is to reduce and eliminate home and community-based waiting lists. And there are over 17,000 Iowans on the waiting list currently right now. And We're excited after conversations with Iowa Medicaid and Department of Human Services that there are plans to build infrastructure and services in Iowa, but we still want to advocate for services. Early intervention, ongoing services and supports are ones that really help and open the world for many Iowans, and this is one that we see as a priority for the state. And so I'm really excited to introduce Chris Hagman. She's from, I'll let her tell you where she's from, but she's from Clear Lake, Iowa, and she's a special education instructor and a consultant, and she's willing or volunteered to share her story about her daughter Riley. So thank you, Chris, for being here.
I almost forgot to unmute. Well, thank you for inviting me today, and thank you for those attendees that are here and hearing our story. So our story, we have been Iowans pretty much our whole life, and I'm not young. So we have a daughter with Down syndrome who is 22. We also have 2 grown sons that are both married that you can see in the picture there with their lovely wives. One lives in Kansas City and one lives in Minneapolis. After Riley had graduated from high school, we moved to Minnesota for a couple of years. Riley had been on a waiver from about age 4 until she was 19, and we moved to Minnesota. There was no waiting list when we moved to Minnesota. Was able to get some of those community services, was able to get some respite, job coaching, some supported community living, just to keep her engaged in the community. And then after 2 years of living out of the state of Iowa, we decided, well, we need to really come back and engage back in Iowa and move back here, which was great. But my first concern was, well, we need to get her on a waiver back in Iowa. So I had some conversations before we moved. I actually filed waiver paperwork the day we signed on our house in Iowa. Filled it out and was told there was a waiting list. And I thought, well, a couple of months is fine. I actually had a conversation with someone who's on the Iowa DD Council, and she's like, there can't be a 4.5-year waiting list. Let me make a call. And she came back in the room and she said, there's a waiting list. And when I see the number 17,000 people waiting for services, that breaks my heart. We have been very blessed. We're able to provide the supports that we need for Riley. It's not ideal, I'll be very honest. Post high school is a very big transition time for all young people with a disability. Many of their supports, many of their social things all go away when high school ends. And I knew that. I was a special education teacher for many, many years. I now work as a special ed consultant for one of the Iowa AEAs. But those things all end. And then when we came here and realized, wait, there's not even any waiver services for quite a while, that was pretty disheartening to hear. And again, it's hard for our family. If we need to go somewhere, we don't have family around. So either Riley goes with us if that's possible, or if it's something that she can't go with, she's able to be home alone for short periods of time. But it does limit just what she's able to participate in the community, because we both work outside the home. There's many times that she's home with no services throughout the day or on the weekends. And the other thing that I just really want to advocate for is we are able to provide a lot of what Riley needs. But I also think of just so many of the families that I've worked with through the years of being a special education teacher. And I worked at the high school level as a transition teacher. And we just have a lot of families that really need that support. And when I think they leave high school and there's no supports for them, that is really disheartening. And then I just think, who's helping them to take those next steps to get those services for their young adults. So we are very blessed. Riley, as you can see, is employed at Subway here in Clear Lake. So if you ever stop in there, say hi. She'll fill your pop and get you what you need. But I do appreciate you just thinking about those other people on a waiting list for all kinds of waivers. It's not all people like Riley, but really they are such a support to families that are so necessary. So thank you so much for being here and just listening to our story.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I think you might have said this, but I think it bears repeating. I know when you applied, you applied over a year and a half ago, and your understanding is that you could be on a waiting list for 4 years. And having received services for that long, that kind of, it's difficult. And you guys are able to do that. But I think one thing that ties back to our first legislative priority around the workforce is we do see more and more that families, neighbors, friends are filling the gaps of reduced services. And that does take them away from other productive things that they're maybe doing in their lives. And a lot of family members, one of our council members yesterday said, you know, often he's happy to do that for his son. His son's not always, that's not his first preference, is to have his parents still in his life at the age of 30. So I think we have to remind ourselves that part of it too. And it does stunt that ability to make that transition that we all look forward to. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I did want to just kind of take a second to kind of just really talk in a large picture again about our 3 priorities. We're really working with a lot of strategies around workforce, and then we know that there's a lot of opportunity out there to advocate for that. Our second one is really looking to make sure that Iowa is inclusive and welcoming and accessible to people with disabilities. And then we really would like to work on the waiting list, because we know there are people out there that are really in need of service. So again, as Brooke said, we're so thankful people are here today. We were really excited about the work that we did last year up at the Capitol, and all those people, the senators and representatives are working on the behalf of Iowans. We're pleased that you're here and happy that you're here. So at this point, we do have a little over 10 minutes to start taking some conversation. So I'm going to unshare my screen, and I think we'll be able to go.
And Bill, if I could just add, because this came out as a question too, because of the short amount of time, we do have what we're calling basically some call to action items that are listed in our agenda. Some of those things that legislators could consider doing to help with the waiting list, to help with the accessibility, and then to help with the workforce crisis that we're in. So when you do get an opportunity, do check out the full details of our agenda, because we do give some possible solutions that can be looked at to help address those 3 agenda concerns that we have.
Bill, can I say something real quick?
Please. Yep.
Yes, I too want to reiterate and thank everybody for being on this. There is a lot in the accessibility world, and unless you have a loved one or you face it day in and day out, you can't tell this, but I'm talking to you from a wheelchair. And so my day starts every morning with either my wife getting me up or my son and helping me get showered and get out so I can get to work and be a productive member of the Iowa society. And so I know that these tasks are big, but we need your help. And Iowa is a beautiful state. We want people to move here. We want people to spend dollars in this state. And by all of us coming together and really looking at this, whether it be the caregivers, the inclusivity, or getting people off the wait list, this is huge. And you have the opportunity to make a huge difference. And so thank you for at least taking the time today to be on this call to hear. And if you would join us, I believe we can make Iowa a state that shines bright in the United States in accessibility. And so will you help us do that?
Thank you, Rob. That's wonderfully said. So right now we'd like to open it up if there's a representative or a senator who would like to ask or make a comment about the priorities. If you raise your hand, I think we can unmute you at that point.
Bill, Senator Trone Garrett did have a question, and I don't know, Senator, if you want to come live to ask that, and maybe we can talk about it, because we did have to get some information about the investment from DHS at our council meeting yesterday. I don't know if Terry, if you're able to unmute the senator.
You're
Hello.
on, Sarah.
Oh, good.
Hello,
Okay.
Senator.
I really appreciate this presentation. It helps so much to have your points so clearly illustrated by the people in our state. And so it's going to take an investment to make these changes. And so I was wondering what financial investment it would take to get folks off of that home-based, community-based services waiting list.
And Bill, do you want to share what we learned from Director Garcia yesterday? That's kind of like the $1 million question.
Yeah, so yesterday we did have Director Garcia speak at our council, and it is the $1 million question of, I think there is some questions about where people are in the waiting list and what it would take to fund their services. And then there's also, I mean, my understanding is that she said that those are real hard numbers, and that they do have they're working with a consultant to come in and look at that piece. And they said that they needed an actuary to kind of project what that total cost might be. There are a number of, the one thing I would add to that my understanding is that a lot of people who are on the waiting list have, not all of them, Chris is an example, not of that, but some of them have younger children where it's those initial services. And I think that we all know, in comparison to the larger cost of large residential or adult services, children's services, they don't need as much service, or they might need some more intermediate services that would cost less. But I don't know that there was a dollar amount yesterday that we discussed, but it was just they're building out in this next year a plan to address that, and also community-based support services.
Yeah, I think some of the issue with that is that the folks on the waiting list, there's no real needs assessment to see that, so they need so much services, so much supported community living, or so much respite, and the average amount of services that people are getting might not be accurate, because people, like have we've talked about, like with Rob and with Tucker, might be needing more services than what they're actually getting. And so we really don't truly know what the average true cost is per person to add. But I think they are looking at what's the best way to try to and estimate that. But thank you for that question, Senator. And it looks like Senator Reagan has her hand up as well.
So thank you for doing this presentation, especially for Tucker, who isn't here to share his story. He's shared it many times with all of us, and Rob and Chris. I'm sorry. That you know how that just happens. I'm sorry. Anyway, I think that, with all the reserves that we have, this is certainly a time that we should be addressing things like this. It's really something I've heard the entire time I've served in the legislature, and it's time. I think that we certainly know the advantages, and Rob, I think you explained a little of that to us, that we can do some of those things, because it's really critical that we include everyone as a state. And I apologize, but I have to get off this for clearly a phone call, but more so I have another Zoom to get to. But I appreciate you continuing the fight and engaging all of us, because we need to be a part of that with you as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. Brooke, I think we have a question from Senator Chelsea, in regards to how did we register. Senator Garrett had ran making it harder for folks to find housing. Last year, housing, accessibility and inclusion definitely includes. You're on there. I'll let you go ahead and speak, Senator Chelsea, and then I can respond to that question as well. There you are.
Hi.
We can hear you now, I think.
Sorry, just a second. Can you hear me?
It's getting a little more clear. Try one more time.
Hi, Ariel.
It's still pretty rough.
I'm sorry, I probably won't be able to talk. I'm not at a place where I can talk right now. So, but I would like to hear you address that Section 8 bill that Senator Garrett ran last year.
Okay, great. Again, I was kind of starting to cue that up a little bit around, we're certainly for an inclusive Iowa and accessible Iowa. We would want, we know that housing is a large struggle, both from cost and accessibility, accessibility to transportation. We just had a town hall up in Mason City this year where a number of our advocates, over 10 or 12, had spoken directly to the mayor and the city council about addressing the bus line, both from a time standpoint, but also an availability standpoint, for them to access their community. They had built a new kind of a movie theater and kind of food area in that town, but the bus wasn't running consistently. So, and I bring that back to the apartment part of it. I would say that we wouldn't be in favor of more hurdles or making it more difficult for people with disabilities to receive housing. As a matter of fact, we would look for more accessible housing in more variety of areas, both from a cost standpoint, because that can be a challenge, but certainly from a availability standpoint.
Was there any other of our legislators that wanted to make some comments in our last 3 minutes? We do have one question in the chat, Bill, that I'm not sure I have the information on. Can you tell us where Iowa stands in the nation as far as providing services and being a good place for persons with disabilities to live? I read that Iowa was ranked 45. I hope that's not true. That was Suzanne. I'm not sure where that number came from, Suzanne. I'm not sure for the rankings for services. We do have 7 waivers that are kind of complicated too. And there's other states that do provide services in a less complicated way, and it's not so hard to actually access those. And I think Iowa's actually looking at doing that with some of the dollars that are available now on investing on trying to make the waiver system more flexible and that all services are available for all waivers, because that's not currently the way that it stands now. That how we rank within the other states, I think we're probably right in the middle.
Yeah,
I don't know if you didn't.
We do know, there's information out there both from ours, but also DHS in regards to the findings from the Department of Justice. And I'm not sure about the rankings, but what I would say is that, again, yesterday at the council, Director Garcia came and spoke and outlined a very clear assessment plan, kind of an assessment over this next year. And even though while they're assessing, it also sounds like they have a lot of things moving forward to try to enhance services. And so I feel like we're trying to make sure we're staying on top of that and communicating what those changes would be. But that should, I think it's their goal. I know for sure. I know it's our goal. I know it's many of our advocates' goals to move these services in a more positive motion. If Iowa was ranked there, or even if it was half, we need to do better, as Rob said, and make it, that's our goal, is to make it a place where people with Iowans can live here and receive the services they need. So, Amy just commented there, Brooke, she kind of confirmed the 45th, but doesn't know the criteria.
Thanks, Amy. I was kind of hoping it wasn't true.
A lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We're right at our time. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank all the advocates that are on the phone call. Certainly want to thank the senators and representatives that joined us today in our advocacy and our fight for making sure services are where they need to be for people with disabilities. And I want to end with really thanking Tucker, who isn't here today, but to thank Rob and Chris and Riley for sharing their story. Stories are what matters, because they connect us to the steps that we need to take to make it better. So thank you, everyone, and everybody stay safe with all the snow and the weather, and we appreciate it.
So if I could just add to just one more thing, sorry, I know we're a little bit over, but yes, I appreciate Bill thanking everyone, and I echo that. But I do also want to say that this is just a beginning conversation. This isn't just a one and done. So we do invite anybody that wants to have a more in-depth conversation about what we'd like to see happen to reach out to us. We're going to be meeting hopefully with some of our state leaders to talk more in depth about some of the things we'd like to see happen. And so we look forward to working with everybody this session to make some real change in Iowa. And stay safe with this new snowstorm we have. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.